At a traffic light, two cars pull up side by side. One is quiet, understated. A $30,000 Toyota that almost disappears into the background. The other wants to be noticed. A German badge. Clean lines. A presence that feels intentional. Now here's the part most people miss. It's not the cars that are different, it's the people behind them. Because while one driver might glance around sublime aware of who's watching, the other is staring straight ahead, already thinking about something else entirely. And that difference, it's not about taste. It's about what they value when no one's looking. Most people assume car choices are about preference, style, performance, maybe even status. But for this particular kind of Toyota owner, the decision is much quieter than that. It's almost invisible. They didn't stand in the showroom imagining how others would see them. They stood there asking a different question. Will this complicate my life or simplify it? And that question tells you everything. Because this isn't really about avoiding German cars. It's about avoiding friction. You start to notice patterns. These are the people who don't like unnecessary variables. They don't enjoy things that demand constant attention, even if those things offer excitement in return. In psychology, there's a tendency some people develop over time, a preference for predictability over stimulation. Not because they're boring, but because they've learned that stability has a different kind of reward. Peace. Now think about that for a second. While one person sees a car as an experience, the other sees it as infrastructure. Something that should work. Every time. Without negotiation. No surprises. No drama. No hidden costs waiting around the corner. And the interesting part is, they're not sacrificing anything in their mind. They're optimizing. Because to them, excitement that comes with conditions doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a trade-off, and they've already decided they're not interested in that deal. But there's something deeper happening underneath this mindset. Because when someone consistently chooses what minimizes risk, they're not just organizing their finances, they're organizing their life. You'll see it beyond the car. The same person likely values routines that don't break, systems that don't fail, relationships that don't feel volatile, not perfect, just dependable. And this is where it shifts from behavior into identity. Because over time, these choices stop being decisions. They become a way of seeing the world. A quiet belief that says, if I can remove enough uncertainty, I can finally relax. But here's where it gets interesting. Because that belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's usually built slowly, over years of small experiences that most people forget. Moments where something didn't go as expected. Plans that fell apart. Things that were supposed to be worth it, but quietly weren't. And over time, a pattern forms. Not consciously, not dramatically. Just a subtle shift in how someone approaches decisions. They stop asking, what do I want right now? And start asking, what will still make sense later? That's a very different way to live. Because once you begin thinking like that, your relationship with risk changes. You don't eliminate it completely, but you start filtering it out wherever you can. And this is where the $30K Toyota starts to make more sense. It's not a compromise, it's alignment. You'll notice these people don't feel like they're missing out. They're not secretly wishing they had chosen the louder option. There's no internal conflict. If anything, there's relief. Because while others are navigating the emotional highs and lows of ownership, the excitement, the pride, the occasional regret, this person experiences something much flatter, but also much calmer. And that calm isn't accidental. It's engineered. Now consider this. There's a concept where people derive satisfaction not from gaining something new, but from avoiding future problems, not having to deal with breakdowns, not having to worry about unexpected costs, not having to think twice before making a decision. That absence of stress becomes the reward, and once someone gets used to that feeling, it becomes very hard to give up. Because now, it's not just about cars anymore. It's about how they define a good decision. A good decision isn't the one that excites them the most. It's the one they won't have to revisit. No second guessing, no lingering doubt. No hidden consequences waiting to reveal themselves later. Just closure. And that creates a very specific kind of confidence. Not loud confidence, not the kind that needs to be seen, but a quiet certainty that says, I've already thought this through. And maybe that's why they'll never buy a German car. Not because they don't understand the appeal, but because they do. They understand exactly what comes with the trade-offs, the unpredictability, the emotional attachment, and they've already decided that's not a game they want to play. But there's something even deeper beneath that decision. Because when someone starts designing their life around avoiding friction, what are they trying to protect? At first, it sounds like a practical question. Money, time, convenience. But if you watch closely, it goes further than that. Because people don't build entire decision-making systems just to save a few $1,000s or avoid a trip to the mechanic. That level of consistency usually points to something internal, something they've learned to value at a deeper level. It might be mental space, the kind you don't notice until it's gone. Think about how many small decisions quietly drain attention, unexpected problems, things that need fixing, variables you didn't plan for. Each one pulls a little bit of focus away from everything else. Now imagine someone who has felt that accumulation before. Not once, but repeatedly. Over time, they start to realize something subtle. It's not the big problems that wear you down, it's the constant possibility of them. So they adapt. They begin removing anything that introduces unnecessary uncertainty, not just because it's inconvenient, but because it fragments their attention. And attention, to them, is valuable. More valuable than image. More valuable than excitement, maybe even more valuable than the experience itself. This is where it shifts again, because now the Toyota isn't just about reliability or cost efficiency. It becomes a boundary, a quiet way of saying, I don't want this part of my life to demand energy from me. And once that boundary is in place, something interesting happens. They stop thinking about the car entirely. It fades into the background, exactly as intended. No checking for issues. No anticipating problems, no emotional attachment that pulls their focus back to it. It just exists, doing its job. And that absence of attention, that's the point. Because it frees them to invest that energy somewhere else. Work, family, personal goals, stability in other areas that feel more meaningful. Now compare that to someone who chooses the opposite. They might accept a certain level of unpredictability because the experience feels worth it. The sound, the design, the identity tied to it. But this person, they've already decided that their attention has a higher purpose, and they guard it carefully, which is why, when you look at their choices, they can seem almost unemotional. But it's not that they lack emotion. It's that they've learned where not to spend it. And that creates a very specific kind of life, one where fewer things go wrong, but also fewer things demand to be felt. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because if you remove enough friction from your life, you also remove certain kinds of intensity, the unexpected highs, the stories, the moments that don't make sense in a spreadsheet. So the question isn't just what they're protecting. It's what they might be quietly giving up in return, and whether they even see it that way. Because from the inside, it doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like clarity. There's no sense of sacrifice when you genuinely don't value the thing you're missing. No quiet regret, no second thoughts late at night, just a steady alignment between what you believe and how you live. And that's what makes this type of person so consistent. They're not constantly reevaluating their choices based on what others are doing. They're not pulled by trends or tempted by what looks good in someone else's life. They've already defined their version of enough. And once someone does that, everything changes. Because now, decisions become easier. Not because there are fewer options, but because most options no longer apply. The German car isn't rejected out of fear. It's filtered out. It simply doesn't fit into the system they've built. A system where peace matters more than presence. Where things are chosen for how little they interrupt life, not how much they enhance it. And there's something quietly powerful about that. In a world where people are constantly chasing upgrades, this person is refining, removing, simplifying, trying to reach a point where life feels manageable, predictable, and under control. But here's where it shifts one last time. Because control, no matter how carefully constructed, is never complete. There are always variables you can't eliminate, outcomes you can't predict, moments that don't follow the plan. And deep down, everyone knows that, even the person who chooses the most reliable path. So maybe the Toyota was never really about eliminating uncertainty. Maybe it was about negotiating with it, reducing it just enough to feel safe without having to confront the fact that it never fully goes away. And that's a very human thing, to build systems, to create order, to design a life that feels stable on the surface, even if the deeper questions remain unanswered. Because at some point, it stops being about cars or money or decisions. It becomes about how much uncertainty you're willing to live with, how much unpredictability you can tolerate before it starts to feel like risk instead of possibility. And that line is different for everyone. Some people cross it for the experience, others step back from it for the peace. Neither one is wrong, but they lead to very different lives. So when you see that quiet $30,000 Toyota blending into traffic, asking for nothing, demanding nothing, it might not just be a practical choice. It might be a reflection of someone who has already decided what kind of life they want to live. Not louder, not faster, just more certain. And maybe the real question isn't why they'll never buy a German car. Maybe it's this. When you make your next big decision, are you choosing what adds something to your life or what removes something from it?